Thank you for joining with me again as we continue our exploration of A Course in Miracles. For this video, we are reading a section of the text. We are in chapter 1, section 5, and then we'll be practicing lesson number 63 together, and then we'll be looking at principle number 21. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, clicking on Read A Course in Miracles, clicking on the text. We're in chapter 1, section 5, Wholeness and Spirit. Paragraph 1. The miracle is much like the body in that both are learning aids for facilitating a state in which they become unnecessary. When spirit's original state of direct communication is reached, neither the body nor the miracle serves any purpose. While you believe you're in a body, however, you can choose between loveless and miraculous channels of expression. You can make an empty shell, but you cannot express nothing at all. You can wait, delay, paralyze yourself, or reduce your creativity almost to nothing, but you cannot abolish it. You can destroy your medium of communication, but not your potential. You did not create yourself. All right, so let's look. So this paragraph is introducing us to our wholeness, which is our holiness, but it's also acknowledging that while we believe we have a body, so there in the paragraph it says, while you believe you are in a body, you can choose between loveless and miraculous channels of expression. So loveless forms of expression are an effect of fear and guilt, whereas here we can still choose to be in the world, to be ourselves, and be loving, which would be creating the conditions for miracles, right? Miraculous channels of expression. And then the paragraph says you can make an empty shell, but you cannot express nothing at all. And that's because what we are as physical beings are broadcasters and transmitters and transmuters. We are a broadcasting device, a communication device. We emit, we receive, and we emit. So this paragraph is showing us that we cannot express nothing at all because it's not in our nature to express nothing. We inherently will express no matter what. Then the paragraph finishes with, you can wait, delay, paralyze yourself, which I interpret as procrastination, right? Analysis paralysis, where you don't take any kind of action. So you paralyze yourself, or reduce your creativity almost to nothing, which I also think is a danger, quote unquote, to a level of spiritual seeking where you take yourself out of your own life, where you separate yourself from life by not actively being a participant in it. This reminds me of two stories. So one story is the story of the monk who goes up into a cave in the mountains and meditates for years and years, let's say 20 years, and he attains enlightenment, and then he comes down from the mountain and he enters into the village, and then one of the first things that happens is that a farmer with his harvest on his back bumps into him, bumps into the monk that came down from the mountain, and the monk feels this flash of indignation, this flash of anger. And he realizes, oh, that I didn't attain enlightenment at all, because we need to test how we're doing amongst one another. And the second story that this reminds me of is during a quantum healing hypnosis session, somebody saw the life as a hermit. And the hermit was a man who had, on his own, developed a sustainable life, some self-sufficiency. He was able to grow his own food and live relatively contently. And in the quantum healing hypnosis, we explore the life, the scene that we arrive into, and then we look at important days. And so we went through a couple of important days, and in both important days, people had discovered him and then invited him to come back to the village and to teach them what he had learned. And both times he refused. And then at the end, we come to the last day of the life that we're looking at and seeing. And on that last day, he expressed being quite bitter and feeling quite alone and lonely. And so when we were on the other side and speaking to the part of this consciousness that oversees the life, then the feedback that this person received was you were given two opportunities to share, to go back into community and share what you had learned, and you refused. So what this paragraph says to me is that we're not here to necessarily be hermits in our own seeking path. We're here to be a part of community and to contribute our unique gifts and creativity into the collective so that we collectively and individually can attain our potential. Because as this paragraph says, we did not create ourselves, but what we are is an expression of the creative life force. Okay, so let me go back now to share the screen so that we can look at paragraph 2. The basic decision of the miracle-minded is not to wait on time any longer than is necessary. Time can waste as well as be wasted. The miracle worker, therefore, accepts the time control factor gladly. He recognizes that every collapse of time brings everyone closer to the ultimate release from time, in which the Son and the Father are one. Equality does not imply equality now. When everyone recognizes that he has everything, individual contributions to the sonship will no longer be necessary. We're not here to waste time. The paragraph says time can waste as well as be wasted. And so I feel like when we're on the path of spiritual seeking, that we accidentally and innocently can waste time. This paragraph says the miracle worker accepts the time control factor gladly. In a way, part of the paradox is that we are time-based creatures and that we use time to access the abiding presence that precedes and holds this whole experience. The next sentence says, he recognizes that every collapse of time brings everyone closer to the ultimate release of time, in which the Son and the Father are one. And so it's through being our creative, curious, and loving selves that we find ourselves focused on that which is of interest and supportive of our soul's purpose. And it's through that focused intent that we transcend time and we experience what we would call in the flow. And it's in the flow that our mind state goes into alpha and theta, and it's there in those brainwave states away from beta, which is where we worry, where we ruminate, where we hold our grievances. That cannot exist. They're incompatible. Those thought systems, those thought frequencies are incompatible with alpha and theta. And it's in the alpha and theta brainwave states that that's where we can access our inspiration and our divine thoughts. The paragraph then says, equality does not imply equality now. And the now is in italics. What I love about the Course is that it squeaks in these little truths that point us to where society, through its own rulemaking, is going wrong. So this sentence is reminding us that we are not all equal. We're not all equal now while we're in our bodies. And that's important because it gives us permission not to be equal. And this is in the face of the architects and social engineers are pushing forth this agenda through the education system and through policy that we are all equal, which ultimately becomes detrimental to society because society really runs on the merits and the skills and the gifts of the individuals. And it's the individuals that then make up the whole. So I love how the Course highlights these little nuances that are true for us and things to look out for in society, and also for us to accept. We can accept that we are not all equal now here in this realm, in our bodies. So in the schoolyard, not everybody gets an award just for participation. And then the paragraph finishes with, when everyone recognizes that he has everything, which can only be recognized in true presence, when in this full present now moment we can't find anything missing or anything wrong, then the paragraph finishes with, individual contributions to the sonship will no longer be necessary, because it's in that moment that the union takes place. The thing about A Course in Miracles, though, is that it seems to suggest that in order for us to truly be ourselves, it's without a body. So I'm curious as to how you reconcile that, how that lands for you. And I can feel that that can be quite confronting. But anyway, the reality is, as paragraph 1 suggests and says directly, is that while you believe you're in a body, which we do, then we are at choice. We have choices to make in the way that we use our minds and our attention. Do we use our mind to create the conditions for miracles through love and through the bridge of forgiveness? Or do we continue with attack and perpetuating fear through lovelessness? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again for paragraph 4. Ultimately, every member of the family of God must return. The miracle calls him to return because it blesses and honors him, even though he may be absent in spirit. God is not mocked, is not a warning, but a reassurance. God would be mocked if any of his creations lacked holiness. The creation is whole, and the mark of wholeness is holiness. Miracles are affirmations of sonship, which is a state of completion and abundance. Okay, so I think it's just enough to land on that our wholeness really is pointing to our holiness. And we must be holy because we did not create ourselves. We are creations of the Creator, of God. Let's stick with that for paragraph 4. Okay, so I'm going to go now to share the screen again for paragraph 5. Whatever is true is eternal and cannot change or be changed. Spirit is therefore unalterable because it is already perfect. But the mind can elect what it chooses to serve. The only limit put on its choice is that it cannot serve two masters. If it elects to do so, the mind can become the medium by which spirit creates along the line of its own creation. If it does not freely elect to do so, it retains its creative potential, but places itself under tyrannous rather than authoritative control. As a result, it imprisons, because such are the dictates of tyrants. Wow. To change your mind means to place it at the disposal of true authority. Okay, so the paragraph starts with whatever is true is eternal and cannot change or be changed, right? So if it's eternal, it is unchangeable, unchanging, because it's eternal. It always was, always is, which is so difficult for our personality minds to wrap our heads around. We cannot wrap our heads around eternity. And so therefore, we cannot really wrap our heads around that which is really, truly true. And perhaps this is why this text has made its way into our reality to be read and talked about and explored and studied in this way. So then it says, spirit is therefore unalterable because it is already perfect. Okay, so then it's saying that spirit then is part of the eternal. Must be because it's unalterable and it's already perfect. So that which is true, that which is eternal, is perfect. Our spirit is true and eternal and therefore perfect. We have the other phenomena of the mind, the human mind. So the mind elects what it chooses to serve. So does it serve that which is true, or does it serve that which is false? And what is false is that which is loveless. Loveless is based on fear and guilt. So what is untrue is the fear and the guilt. The fear and the guilt then are the cause, the source for a mind that would become what we would interpret as tyrannical, even sociopathic, because that mind uses fear to seek and to attain authority through power. And we can see this through history. We can see this being played out through history. And even in the Christ story, we know that his perfection, he was perfect, and tyranny murdered perfection. So we see it there in that story, and we see it get played out again and again in history and through any story that is a tragedy that we might see on the news. And so the paragraph then is making a distinction between that which is tyrannical and that which is authoritative. And here the word authoritative is capitalized. And so it's pointing to true authority, which would be the authority of God, of the infinite creator, of Christ. Okay, so let's continue with paragraph 6. And it's the last paragraph. Okay. The miracle is a sign that the mind has chosen to be led by me in Christ's service. The abundance of Christ is the natural result of choosing to follow him. All shallow roots must be uprooted because they're not deep enough to sustain you. The illusion that shallow roots can be deepened and thus made to hold is one of the distortions on which the reverse of the golden rule rests. As these false underpinnings are given up The equilibrium is temporarily experienced as unstable. However, nothing is less stable than an upside-down orientation, nor can anything that holds it upside down be conducive to increased stability. What strikes me about this paragraph is that first sentence, where clearly the me and Christ are not the same. They're different concepts. The first sentence says, the miracle is a sign that the mind has chosen to be led by me being Jesus, in Christ's service. Jesus is in service to Christ. Christ is the Christos. It's the light. It's the enlightened one, the anointed one. Jesus here being the brother of the sonship, the brother of humanity. He himself in Christ's service as the man, as Jesus. I'm guessing. I'm just responding to what's in front of me. The next sentence says, the abundance of Christ is the natural result of choosing to follow him. So the abundance of the Christos, of Christ consciousness, is the natural result of making a choice for the small, separated mind to now make a choice to follow him. And then it says, all shallow roots must be uprooted because they're not deep enough to sustain you. And so perhaps it's where what is it that we ground ourselves in? What do we make important in this lifetime? And are those things too superficial and too shallow and not really where we get our spiritual nutrition? So something to think about for our lives, I suppose. Then it says, the illusion that shallow roots can be deepened and thus made to hold is one of the distortions on which the reverse of the golden rule rests. So we know that the golden rule is to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the golden rule. And as we take a breath and look around, and as we think back over history and know our path, it does seem that because we are here to really master the art of the golden rule, it seems that we haven't done a great job, at least systemically, because otherwise we still wouldn't be hurting each other on the massive scale that we do, that society does. So it seems like this is a little bit of a spotlight on the tyranny that was mentioned in the previous paragraph, that perhaps what we are living is an effect of the reverse of the golden rule, of not living the golden rule, which is where only the shallow roots must rest. The shallow roots would be, making material gain the most important thing, making that a priority, greed, selfishness. And so as these false underpinnings are given up, the equilibrium is temporarily experienced as unstable. Okay, then it continues, however, nothing is less stable than an upside down orientation, nor can anything that holds it upside down be conducive to increased stability. So it seems though we're being shown that we're in an upside down world because humanity seems to, or the powers that be, the architects of this world, that organize the systems and the man-made rules in such a way that have us fighting for our freedom and our sovereignty and our self-determination, fighting for choice, is the inversion, that we're living in the inversion. Perhaps that's what this paragraph is pointing to. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts about it are. Goodness. All right, so to that, let's see what our lesson is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again for lesson 63. So we're going back to the main screen. We're clicking on the workbook for students, lesson 63, and our lesson is the light of the world brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness. All right, so I'm going to let the narrator read this for us.
Lesson 63. Light of the world brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness. How holy are you who have the power to bring peace to every mind? How blessed are you who can learn to recognize the means for letting this be done through you. What purpose could you have that would bring you greater happiness? You are indeed the light of the world with such a function. The Son of God looks to you for his redemption. It is yours to give him, for it belongs to you. Accept no trivial purpose or meaningless desire in its place, or you will forget your function and leave the Son of God in hell. This is no idle request that is being asked of you. You are being asked to accept salvation that it may be yours to give. Recognizing the importance of this function, we will be happy to remember it very often today. We will begin the day by acknowledging it and close the day with the thought of it in our awareness. And throughout the day, we will repeat this as often as we can. The light of the world brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness. I am the means God has appointed for the salvation of the world. If you close your eyes, you will probably find it easier to let the related thoughts come to you in the minute or two that you should devote to considering this. Do not, however, wait for such an opportunity. No chance should be lost for reinforcing today's idea. Remember that God's Son looks to you for his salvation, and who but yourself must be his son?
Okay, so we're going to practice together for 2 minutes. And the language is the light of the world brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness. And just as a reminder, forgiveness is being able to see one another's innocence, that we're all here playing our unique, perfect, quirky parts, and that all of this has a purpose. And part of that purpose is to communicate and teach us truth, pointing us to our eternal essence where there is true equality. And so, as usual, just start to bring your attention away from out there and away from the past. Gently bring your attention to the truth of this now moment. And so, if it's possible, if you're moving around while you're listening to this recording, if you can just take a moment to be still, to take a seat, bring your attention home to the breath, give yourself permission to be here, to be where your body is, to be where your feet are. Notice the natural ebb and flow of your breathing. If you like, you can allow your eyelids to rest over your eyes. I'm going to share the screen so you can peek at the language as needed, but I'll repeat it for you. And I'm going to go ahead and set the timer now for 2 minutes. It's starting now. The light of the world brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness. I am the means God has appointed for the salvation of the world. And so that's our timer. Okay, so just as a reminder, the light of the world, what it means by light is that which is not dark. So light is love, it is truth, it is the eternal. It communicates, I suppose, as generosity and curiosity and humor and playfulness and beauty, creativity. And the dark is the opposite of those things, born out of the belief of being separate from the Creator. And so that includes or expresses as guilt and fear. It is the energy that holds our grievances. And I just want to say, it's not to say that while we're in our bodies, we, again, as I mentioned before, don't stand up for that which is out of alignment with truth and with God's laws. This whole project is about coming home to God's laws and standing by them and being an advocate for them. So we're given an opportunity here to, in a conscious way, connect with the holy light and to use that as a source of strength to be able to stand up to that which is not in service to the natural laws, to God's laws, and to be the instrument of change. So the invitation for practicing today's lesson is throughout the day for 1 or 2 minutes, just like we practice. But the instructions are also specific in saying, don't wait for an opportunity, but rather let this be the thought that leads you in your day. All right, so I'm going to go back to share the screen again because we will be now taking a look at the principle of miracles. So we go back to the text, chapter 1, the principles of miracles, and we're looking at principle number 21. And as usual, you can take a screenshot of the principle and use that as an added source of contemplation meditation. And so our principle, of course, it's perfectly in alignment with our lesson. Miracles are natural signs of forgiveness. Through miracles, you accept God's forgiveness by extending it to others. All right, and as we've talked about before, forgiveness is realizing that everything is happening exactly as it's supposed to. It's all unfolding as an effect of that which came before. And forgiveness is the bridge through which we can see the truth so that we can do things differently, so that we are at choice, so that we can check in, ask God, ask Jesus, ask the Holy Spirit, where do you want me? How shall I respond to this? What kind of actions shall I take? And so in that way, it becomes a living truth, a living work through you. Just to finish up, as always, I want to invite you to the in-person meditation classes or the natural healing self-help classes. It's best to jump onto the website www.alilacenter.org to check the schedule. You just click on the calendar. So the mindfulness-based meditation class is typically on the third Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern. And the natural healing self-help class, which is a combination of Reiki, Jin Shin Jutsu, breath work, and so on, that's on the fourth Monday of the month, typically at 7 p.m. Eastern. But I do travel and sometimes the schedule changes. So if you do want to join online, if you click on the description, the registration link is there, and all of the classes are by contribution or not. You're welcome to join, because these practices and sitting together create the conditions for miracles. When we sit together with a like-minded intent, we amplify our energy, we amplify our eternal light. And again, to that light, the light is not abstract, it's not made up. When you do sit in meditation, what happens is the what's coming to me is the flotsam and the jetsam and the dregs of the everyday life and the past can get stuck in our energy bodies. But meditation is actually a practice of purification. And what ends up happening is that even though your eyes are closed, it's not dark. You see light, and it becomes quite bright behind your eyes. And that is your inner true light. And so when you have that light available to you, you do have more energy to fulfill your purpose and get your stuff done, and also to heal. It's medicine. All right, so thank you for joining with me in this video, and I will see you soon.